Welcome to the I'm Telling God About This podcast. So I just finished watching a CNN interview with a Christian nationalist, and I found myself agreeing with most, if not everything, that this gentleman, Doug Wilson, had to say. And I always thought that Christian nationalists were bad and they get called Nazis and crazy right-wingers, and I don't know what's going on. The world was on fire a couple weeks ago over this. I am not saying I'm a Christian nationalist, but it was an interesting interview.
Maybe you are,
Anderson.
See, here's the thing for me. Because I've heard different, because the Christian nationalism is not a monolith, right? So it's like it is not necessarily all of the same. There are Christian nationalists that are 100% more anti-Jew than they are pro-Christian, right? And those are, so it kind of fluctuates. But within this, the way
we
that
need
he
a
defined
definition.
it, and the funny thing was, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't really disagree with a lot of what he's saying. And I'm thinking, is it because, this is what I've always thought, or I've just been radicalized by Tim on this on this podcast? I think I'm going to go with the prior. I think I've always kind of thought of this. I think the aversion that I've had to Christian nationalism often is because I'm looking at it as like a theocracy that could be looked at, or case studies would be like the Holy Roman Empire, or the ways that the Protestants were tortured by the Catholics because they disagreed on nuances in the Greek, things like that. And that's not necessarily at all, even close to what Doug Wilson was saying here. But I thought it was an interesting conversation. I can relate to it a lot.
The definition on Wikipedia says Christian nationalism is a form of religious nationalism that focuses on promoting the Christian views of its followers in order to achieve prominence or dominance in political, cultural, and social life. I think I agree with that whole idea.
Well, and
why would you not do
it
that?
As being,
who else
being
did?
Both Christian and an American, with Christianity as the public truth. Now that's broad enough to not have to go into saying Catholicism.
Comment below if you're a Christian nationalist based off of those definitions.
Right.
Don't out yourself. What do you think about Christian nationalism?
All right,
I'm
so
curious.
listen, this is what is interesting about this, is that I think people's aversion to Christian nationalism comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what governments are to begin with. And we've talked about that on this podcast. Like, what is the purpose of government? Promote good and punish evil. Well, you always hear this old saying, like, you can't legislate morality. Well, that's hilarious, because legislation is an ethical systems, and ethical systems are derivative from a moral foundation. So that's bananas. Like, it's a misnomer on its face. Like, it doesn't work. In fact, ask yourself another question: why do we even have nations or borders to begin with? It is so that people who have shared values, right, which derive from a core principle, right, a worldview, which is generally speaking where we also find our moral foundation, right? That's all summed up in that. People who have a cohesive worldview, who bind together to protect themselves and mutually benefit from each other, and to defend themselves against what? People who have a different set of values, who would seek to, profit, benefit, malign, whatever, right? And like the example that you talked about, Josh, I think is a good one, because, we look at something like the Holy Roman Empire, or like, why is it that we had theocracies, or why is it that we had these concepts of like ruling from a mandate from heaven? It's pretty simple. It's because people were just doing what they read in the Bible. It's like, if I believe that this is good and this is evil, and I'm going to pass laws, what else would I use?
Right.
As a source for that?
Well, and I think that some of the early on, if you go back to our early days of I'm Telling God About This podcast, I was the one that was kind of saying, agree with legislating morality. To which you guys properly responded, like, what are you legislating then, if it's not morality? And I think it's probably better to say I'm not in favor of legislating doctrine. I think that ultimately is the fear behind it. But also, at the same time, think about this. This is what really helped me in understanding. Like, if we in the United States, you can argue whether we're a Christian nation or not. But what you can't argue is that the foundation and the basis of what we declare as right and wrong is 100% different in many areas than Islam, than Hinduism, than Mormonism, than a lot of these other religions. And one of the things that Doug Wilson said in this interview that really helped me kind of put it into frame is, he's like, look, if I went to Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't expect to live under a Christian society. I'd expect to live under Sharia law, because that is the society. And to which the interviewer responded correctly, but you want Christianity to be dominant. And he's like, yes, in the way that Paul went to Athens and preached the gospel, to sway. Now, that's the way that but now we have to have a debate, though. You have, maybe not us, but you have to make the conversation. Are we living in Athens trying to evangelize Christianity, or are we living in, Corinth with some crazies? Right? Whereas,
I think it's,
you know
that
what
one.
I mean? Like, we're in the Corinthian church, and we're just having to weed out some of the things that we all agree are wrong, So,
but that's just
I
it.
think that was something that helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think but this is the issue in America that everyone seems to forget, is that we were not founded as a secular country. We were founded as a Christian country that had freedom of religious practice. And there's a fundamental difference between that. A secular society would have made it very clear where it derived its values, its moral foundation. All you have to do is read the Bill of Rights, read the preamble to the Constitution, like read these different documents, and it's explicitly stated where and why and you can even read the writings of our founding fathers, they said, like, hey, our system of government is wholly inadequate for a non-Christian people. You cannot make the claim or the statement that our country was created to have freedom of religion, like not freedom or freedom from religion. No, that's just not true. What we did was what a Christian attitude is, which is this: for what we are accountable for, because you have to think of it this way, right? You are accountable for what you have control over. And in a representative democracy where we vote, we're accountable for the laws we pass or that our legislators pass. And so if I'm going to say it is good to do something or it is bad to do something, then that should be anchored in what I'm commanded to do by God. And that's how our founders felt. And so, but that doesn't mean that you can't come to our country and practice your religion, so long as the practice of your religion does not violate the laws of God. That's effectively what we have in our laws, or what we used to have. And the reason we have so much trouble in our country now is because we try to interpret laws that were created with a moral foundation without the moral foundation to guide them from. In other words, it's like having a map without a compass. We have a map, it tells us where everything is, but we have no way to orient on it interpretively because we've removed that fixed point of reference by which to judge, is this...
Well, and this is really the moral argument in which, secular humanism tends to argue, right? So secular humanism being this idea that humanity is a trial and error. We go with what works. And so it just so happens that our sets of morality that is determined by humanity and by society, it tends to align with some of the foundations of Judeo-Christian values. And so they say, well, we don't need a source of truth in order for us to say that morals are created by us, by humanity, by society. But the problem is, you could talk about that, and you can say that, but at some point you're going to have to make the justification that it's beyond just that what we've all agreed upon. Because the Germans in World War II all agreed that
Yep.
the Jews should be expelled. And that's just one recent example in history. You go throughout
majority.
all of history, it's just all of the societies agreed that they were doing the right thing. And it turns out that really it's not. So it's humanity, the idea that secular humanism is able to develop a strong sense of moral justification or moral foundation based on trial and error and the evolution of what works, what doesn't. Well, that hasn't worked at all in the past in society. The only thing, and it hasn't worked in the Enlightenment either. Look at the Revolution of France, right? There's some terrible things that were happening. The only time that it's actually worked where a society can take credit to say, no, we agree on this that works, is when Christianity was introduced into societies. There was a time where women and children were not considered people until Christianity came to the world. In the United States or in early America, when you had all these tribes of Native Americans that were killing each other. I mean, brutally killing women, children. I mean, the Canaanite conquest is nothing compared to what was happening in early America, and nobody in that area of the world thought it was evil until Christianity was introduced. So
it's
an interesting argument.
Have you guys seen the new Jason Momoa show, the Lord of War or God of War? Have you seen that?
Oh no, it's
the Hawaii one. It's Moana for adults.
Is he like playing the role of King Kamehameha?
No, he's actually not Kamehameha, but it is in that time period, right? It's in the rise of King Kamehameha, right? But what's crazy is like the way these guys make decisions. And I think he's taken some pretty good care to try to remain true to culture, but like he captures like, look, this was a barbaric, violent period of history. And I look at that and I'm like, listen, all of these noble savage kind of concepts, whether or not it's Last Samurai or this, where it's like, look at all these noble traits, but like the savagery and the barbarism of everyday decision making or things that people would do. And, everyone forgets that this evil and this, just barbarism was subdued by Christian culture. And I don't think anyone disagrees with that. Like, do you really want to live in that culture? Like, is that really who you want to be?
He was just dying with honor, Josh. No, he stabbed himself while somebody else cut his head off.
Like, what really happened here? But listen, I want to bring it back to the interview with Doug Wilson. So this is what I find fascinating, right? So yes, like Christian nationalism. This is a lot of what happened in the Doug Wilson interview, where she poses an incendiary statement, like so you want to make the whole nation Christian. And like as if that's supposed to be a bad thing. Yeah. And like Christians are like, oh yeah, does Doug Wilson want to make the whole nation Christian? And Doug Wilson goes like, yeah, like what? Why is that? Is that not what the Bible? Is that what we should do? Like, is it not our nation? Should we not? And then Christians all over the world are going like, wait a minute, do I want to make the whole nation Christian?
Right.
Like. It kind of flips it on its face, but it's like, so I think the most incendiary statement though in this episode, based on what came after it though, was the comments and discussion around whether or not women should vote, or the patriarchal nature of the church, like that men are the head of households and this, that, and the other. What was your thoughts on that?
He got into egalitarianism. In my opinion, his most flamboyant comment was, I'll butcher it, but it was like egalitarian is just disguised feminism or something like that. And I was like,
love
bro.
That.
Well, he made a great illustration of when we say we want everybody to be able to dunk no matter who you are.
Yes, I love that illustration.
The only thing that we're actually getting from that is that we're lowering the net. Which, I'm in favor of, because the WNBA would be a whole lot more entertaining. And also, I might be able to dunk if they lowered it for the men too.
Dude, I literally just saw a meme about the WNBA where it was like a girl is not paying attention, passes the ball in to the opposite team, who takes the shot and misses it. And it was like, and this is the
WNBA in a nutshell.
Anyway, I think we spiraled of the point, but yes, so that's the illustration. And if we're honest, this same mentality is exactly what the voices of equity in society have been saying. It's this woke ideology of this cultural Marxist ideology that, well, everybody needs the same outcome, not necessarily the same opportunity. So most people are for equal opportunity, and I would argue that most people are not equal outcome, because what that does is it requires, it promotes mediocrity, it punishes meritorious, excellence. So, and most people, I think, if they're really sat down and they talk about that without all of the baggage that brings, because if I say, well, I'm for merit-based promotions or merit-based recognition, if we keep it within that grounds, or those boundaries, everybody, I think, would say, yeah, of course. But then we bring up there's disadvantaged people and people that don't have the advantage. And
but let's bring it back to women and men, because this is like, even right now, I'm kind of laughing because look, we've like already like, I don't really want to talk about that. Like, but like look where where we're at. We're not talking about the premise of it. I mean, no, I know you're not doing that, or like, I'm not suggesting you have like, hidden egalitarianism.
But it's easy, I guess it is
for.
Easy to avoid, for sure.
But do you see what I'm saying? Like we end up, let's just drift over here to like all people and all races, instead of just saying like, no, let's take a second and talk about that explicit quote, because I think that was a great quote, Nick. Like, I'm curious what your thoughts were on that. Like, yeah, egalitarianism is just, what was it, like masked feminism or something to that effect?
Yeah, like a perverted feminism or something like that.
So what do you think about that?
I think that we should do an entire episode on egalitarianism and complementarianism, but I will say that I appreciated Doug's take and his illustrations. His illustrations were masterful around the egalitarian, complementarian conversation, and really all of this, apparently a lot of the triggering things that Christian nationalism is known for, patriarchal orientations and such, really just is underpinned by things that were designed with a purpose and a modality. And the egalitarian complementarian conversation is, hey, and I think Doug did an amazing job answering her, by the way. He did a masterful job of answering her, by the way. He's like, men and women are equal. He actually brought up the analogy, I'm literally just remembering it, of telling the woman that she is equal with her boss in value as a human. It's like, you are absolutely equal.
Right.
However, he has authority over you.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a beautiful illustration complementing his conversation around there are different roles.
That's what I think. Like, what do we think this says about the state of evangelicals even? Like, I mean, is it not interesting that this is such a prolific problem? Like, I'm saying this is like, I'm a incredibly conservative. Like, I certainly, what's hilarious is I think I'm pretty moderate by church historical standards. Like, I take the Bible at its word and what it says, but I know, because I've had these conversations in the company of Bible-believing, like, super committed Christians, and this is an uncomfortable conversation to have. Yeah. Why is it that it is so hard to believe that the God of the universe designed us to unique ends for a purpose that is beyond
with unique
ourselves?
Roles.
Yeah.
It's, it's interesting, and I think that he used a pretty good analogy, and he said it's hard to say that one is more valuable, like a man is not as valuable as a woman, or a woman is not as valuable as a man, because it's like saying that the violin or the bow is more valuable when they're the same instrument. And I think what society tends to push is that women are violins and men are cellos, and we value cellos more than we value violins. But the reality is, men are just a bunch of violins looking for some bows to get, well, I don't wanna get
So
too
what
much
does this
into
have? No, but this is the point, right?
But it's this complementary thing. We can't really reach the fullness of, and this is not a knock on people that choose celibacy and who are not married, but there's a reason that God uses the analogy of marriage to relate his relationship with the church. There's something special there that and when women are created for men, it's not necessarily to serve our ends and glorify us. It's so that we both glorify God. And that, you can go into the Greek aspects of, or the Hebrew aspects of Genesis when it talks about, well, he's the helpmate, it's just a helper. And how valuable is a helper? Well, no, we're talking about like you don't have a bow for the violin doesn't make noise, and the ways that God created men and women in his image, it's both. And Doug Wilson actually mentioned this as well. He said he created men and women together are the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
And
he did say that.
God made Adam from dirt. He picks up dirt and breathes life into them. And then when he fashions women, the language of the Hebrews, it's like he took his time to create something delicate, to be something that could be exalted and looked at as beautiful, as wonderful. And it's reflected in Adam's song as flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. Finally, every other animal has this helper, has this companion, and now I finally have one. And so this view of marriage, of men and women and how they complement each other, is something that is so beautiful, and it's disgusting that it's been so perverted as you're a cello, I'm a violin, my notes sound better. Like it's
or
really
perverted in the sense of we're the same and we have the same authority, and we have to make every, like, it's, yeah. And here's the thing. So like, what does this have to do with, the notion of like Christian nationalism, or why this is surprising? And here's the reality. They're both misunderstandings. This is the point. Like, when we find, like, I love this is a unique situation, right? Because here's what happens. Doug Wilson says something uncomfortable, backs it with scripture, and what do you do as a Christian? You hear something uncomfortable, but you have no defense against it other than the fact that it makes you uncomfortable. What do you do? Right. And the answer is this. What? If it's uncomfortable, if it's unsettling, it's important, and it's highlighting something inside of you. And here's something that we have to get really comfortable with as a society, and the church needs to start getting a lot more comfortable with it. And the responsibility, unfortunately, and the reason we've gotten to where we are is because pastors lack the intestinal fortitude to put their congregations in uncomfortable positions by speaking about things that they know they don't want to hear, but that they also know they have no salient biblical argument, because they understand that what they believe and what they're comfortable with is based on culture and has nothing to do with the Word of God or God's intention for humanity or what he designed us to do. And so this is really the fundamental issue. When I say the word Christian nationalist, and the reason it's on the title of this slide and the reason it's clickbait, and probably the reason you clicked on it, is because you hate that, or that sounds bad. But the reality is that's what we are. We are salt and light, a city on a hill, a people unto ourselves. God disinherited the nations, created the nations, disinherited them, took for himself one, and he called it to be holy. And then with Christ, as the bride of Christ, the church, we, in the same way, right, exist to be salt and light. Our marriages exist to point people to God. And when we refuse to sit in the discomfort of our ignorance and the clarity of the Word of God, and we refuse to allow ourselves to be shaped and molded by that discomfort, like we're robbing ourselves, right?
Right.
We're robbing ourselves, and we're playing into what the enemy wants for us. So like that's what all this has to do with this. Like I think that's what's powerful and telling to me about this interview and why it ruffled so many feathers is like, yeah, I'm sure it did. And I'm so proud of, I'm so thankful for someone like Doug Wilson who sat there calm, cool, collected, and simply gave the biblical perspective. You know?
I'm curious, as the more layman theologian here, Christian nationalism is just this dirty word created in the 21st century, but like when you start to unpack it, it to me sounds like Christians living in truth that we get from God's word and God's design, and then voting accordingly and potentially donating accordingly.
Right.
That,
yeah.
Am I missing something?
No, it's integrity. That's what this is about. Like, it's integrity. It means that your convictions and your actions are aligned.
Whether it's a Roe v. Wade, whether it's marriage and God's design, whether it's I mean, good. The list goes down the line. Immigration or there's LGBTQ plus on the street corners.
I think that there's also something that we need to like. There's practical approaches, right? While my view is that homosexual marriages would be not the law of the land, there is certain concessions that I will make to push us farther in the right direction. Instead of like for instance, there might be a candidate that doesn't necessarily agree, whether it's local or presidential candidate, that doesn't necessarily agree with everything, but maybe a majority of things. And I will vote for them, understanding that they are not going to push this particular aspect. I'm not a one issue voter. I think about practical steps to move towards that. And I think this is an area where I think I have developed, I think more of a maturity on nuancing the stances. I think that early on I had said I wouldn't outlaw pride parades because I would rather have a people be preached to and make the decision not to participate in that type of behavior.
Freedom of speech, Josh. Freedom of speech.
But I think that in my mind, where I was coming from is I'm thinking that I'm in Athens, trying to deliberate with a bunch of Platonists and Stoics.
Yeah, like you're a foreigner in a foreign land, not your country.
But the reality is, I'm not a foreigner in a foreign land. I am a native and a citizen in a land whose foundation it would not have been odd 50, 60 years ago for there to be it would be illegal to have to do homosexual acts, or like, for instance, this is not just solely in the United States. I mean, I think Oscar Wilde back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, like he was arrested and accused of like rape of young children, So like there's all kinds of things that this was common around the world. And so the question is like, at what point did it shift? And the only thing I can think of is, and from what I have been able to research is people that wanted to go and say, I just want to coexist and you can do what you want to do, but just don't bother me with it. But we learned from in the 90s, it was, oh, we just want to have this, LGBT community. We're not trying to get married. What are you talking about? We just want to have our own autonomy. Okay, you can have that. Next thing you know, we need to get married. And this is
now we want to have a pride parade and
you can
flash it in front of your children.
Now we want to teach your children.
Now we want your children to share a bathroom.
Now we want to be able to transition and
more.
And and I mean, I think, gosh, within the
but that's the point, Josh. Like, it's about
really controversial.
But here's the reality. How do we? So what is this? What does this say about the church? Like, what do you do now, right? So you watch something like this. Like, if you haven't watched the interview, go watch the interview, okay? I would love to hear what you think. If you agree with what we're saying, like, listen, I'm not saying it's not going to be uncomfortable. Like, I'm not saying that those conversations aren't comfortable. You know, like, I am a husband to a loving and very capable, strong, independent woman. I have 2 beautiful little girls that are smart, capable. Like, I am very well aware of the ways in which the precepts of God and the teaching of the Bible can be perverted and misused to abuse people. But I have got news for you. Anything that touches on the core of how a human being sees the world is dangerous. Right. But it doesn't make it evil. It doesn't make it wrong. Fire burns. Fire makes internal combustion engines possible. You know, like knives cut, but they make our lives. It's about understanding a deeper understanding in order to be responsible. And I think what interviews like this highlight, to be honest, and I challenge those of you who are in to demand more from your pastors, demand more from yourselves, that you ask and you give them permission and you tell them they shouldn't need it. They're already there. They've been ordained. They've been placed there. But, you know, reaffirming that you are not interested in remaining comfortable if it means that you are comfortable in something that God doesn't want, or if that comfort is preventing us from growing and developing in our faith as a society. Like, I love this about marriage. Josh, you brought it up, and I thought you were going to go all the way with it. But, you know, like, that's one of my favorite epiphanies that I've had reading scripture, and I use it in marriage counseling all the time, is that God takes the dirt, right? And he breathes the spirit in, he creates man. He takes the rib from the man, he breathes the breath life, he creates the woman. And when they fall and God brings judgment, what does he do? He brings judgment for the man against the ground. That the work of the man's hands will always cause stress. It will always take from him, right? And what does he do with a woman? He puts enmity, and he puts the woman at odds with the man. And so here's the point: the relationship, although designed, that's right, that your desire will always be for his position, and you're not going to have it. And here's the reality: that's judgment. And you know why that's there? Because even though he put man against the ground, he put woman against the man, he put nothing between them and himself in the Spirit of God.
That's good.
And is that not the same picture of humanity's relationship to God at large? That even though we live in this broken and cursed world, that we have, by the grace of God, through the work of Jesus on the cross, that we have nothing preventing us from going to him, from receiving nurturing, from receiving life, from receiving peace and joy in our circumstances from him. And is that not the calling of marriage? That a wife submit to her husband as if to God, and that a man love his wife as Christ loved the church, and that he gave himself for a sacrificial love? Isn't that not a perfect picture that the love in the brokenness that's baked in, the brokenness is baked in. It necessitates the Spirit. That people would look at it and say, I don't have that. I have a broken human relationship. This makes no sense to me. And that when we point that to them, that in that picture they see something of their relationship to God or humanity's relationship to God. It is the reason that Jesus uses the church and calls the church the bride of Christ. And I think that is so profound, and it is completely robbed if it's just two people who are the same, who have the same role, who are functionally and in all equivalent, no different from each other in the eyes of God. Like, my God is more creative. My God has bigger pictures, like cleaner appreciations. And if you're listening to this, you probably heard that. That was tremendously powerful to me when I read that. That completely reframed the way that I understand marriage. And that's what we have to pay attention to, is what are we losing when we appeal to the comfort that the notion of equality of outcome and the equality, like this comforting
DEI
idea.
Marriage.
Yeah. Like, what do we give up, you know?
Well, I think
what does it break?
As Christian nationalism conversation goes as a whole, and like cultural secularism says anything goes. Everything goes. Everything's on the table. Do what you want. pure hedonism. And Christian nationalism, dirty word, Christians living in Babylon, promoting truth, goodness, beauty, and the kingdom of God here and now, is basically saying all of this was made with purpose and design, and let's operate and move through the world complying with its original design. The end.
That's it.
Right.
That's it. And you know what?
It doesn't sound that controversial.
Yeah. Well, it is if you're an enemy of God. It is if you're an enemy of God, if you're a sinner, right? Like, what do you mean I have to submit to someone else? I'm an independent and fully functional adult human being. Like, my favorite memes on the internet are the "I girl bossed too hard" memes. I mean, I'm just going to be honest.
I don't even know what that is.
Have you not seen these? These are hilarious. It's like, I girl bossed too hard, and now I have all of this responsibility and, like, no time, and I just want to get married and retire. Like, these memes are hilarious to me because it's so honest. And, like, I'm sorry. Listen, I know there are many happy and content women, but, like, listen, when you've been married and you spend enough time with married women, it's like, listen, that's true. Like that. Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's another side to that, but like there's an authenticity in that I think is, it's a vulnerability that I think is commendable. And, you know, and we see the flip side with men as well, but
you're pulling on the thread of, go ahead, Anderson.
I was just going to say, we're seeing definitely this rise of a pushback to the narrative that has been pushed on our generation of all women need to go to college. You need to focus on a career. You need to be able to be self-sufficient. And then, and only then, maybe find a spouse, settle down, have a kid, take a break. Don't worry. We'll legislate you to get at least a year or so of time. But then you go back and you girl boss, you know? And like, it's this pushback against that. It's like, well, that's not how it works, because I can do all of the first part, but I can't meet a man that wants to have, you know, a family.
Or who's the person? But here's the thing. Like, I'm sorry, and we're not going to get too derailed on this, but this is a really good point, because this is something
at this
that
point,
breaks
if
my
you're
heart.
still here, you're a true fan, and we love you. Leave a comment and hang on.
So
for
we're
the
only
ride.
36 minutes in. You're welcome. We're almost close to landing the plane. We could go for another 30 minutes. All right.
No, I'm serious. Like, if you're still here listening, you're a true fan, and we love you.
No,
I see you.
You're kidding. But listen, this is something that really it is heartbreaking, right? Because I've spent time with young women who are heartbroken and who are just struggling because they feel this tremendous internal pressure to achieve something other than what is a unbelievable achievement, which is to have a family, to raise children, as if that's just, well, you just do that. You don't get points for that. I'm like, nerd, if you haven't done it, you don't get to say that. And I don't know any women that have done it that will look at that and say, yeah, but, you know, like, what do you do for work? You know, right. And if that is the case, then I'm going to point to some deep-seated trauma and, you know, some other brokenness. But it's not fair in our society that we raise young women. And I struggle with this because I'm trying to figure out how to do this with my own young girls. Is
arranged
how do you
marriages,
tell?
Josh.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it makes more and more sense as time goes on. But that's part of the issue, is to say that what is a real, reasonable, and not just reasonable, but like what is a fulfilling goal? Like, I talk to my young girls and I talk to, do you want to be a mom? I want to be a mom. That's amazing. And I pray to God you have that opportunity. And I hope that you prepare yourself, and I want to help you prepare yourself to take full advantage of that. Full advantage. And do you know what that means? That means you get such a small window of opportunity to be a mom and raise children. Or even to be a dad and raise children. We could talk about this. We've mentioned that before. You know, millennial parents spending more time with their kids than ever before. Like, I think that's a turnaround. But we're still fighting this fight from the women's standpoint. And then at the same time, how do you nurture interests? How do you have conversations about aspirations? Because everything, especially in American society, is geared to, what do I want to be when I grow up? And I think the line that I'm walking now is this. and it's easier, and I'm going to be frank. I feel blessed that because of what I do for work, that it's easy to have these conversations because it is part of my everyday life. But when you frame the goals and the mission of what we do with our life in the context of what God put us here to do, i.e., advance the kingdom of God, go and make disciples, baptizing them, and discipling them, everything fits into that line. All of a sudden I found it is a little bit easier to have that conversation because it's not so much about, well, will you have a cool job or will you have an uncool job? Will you make a lot of money or will you make, a little money? Not that those things don't matter, but if we spend more time developing and building our children up towards the work of the kingdom, then I think we have a less of a hard time having those conversations. At least that's been my experience so far. Yeah,
I think the greater piece of the conversation that's helpful for me is that I don't, in learning about Christian nationalism, a lot of the conversation goes back to men and women, but there's a lot more inside Christian nationalism than just that. More, and I mean more in a good way. One of the main reasons it hinges so much on men's roles and women's roles is because they put such a high priority on family. And that is, they get that from the Bible as the essential, core, unifying thing that moves through the world around us. So yeah, I am less and less scared of this idea. I still don't like the term Christian nationalism. I feel like someone co-opted that, and I feel dirty saying it when I say it out loud. It's just I'm call myself a Jesus follower or a Christian, but I guess our secular world needs hats and buckets to put people in. And I don't know. It's interesting.
I think the problem is it's everybody wants to run to the extremes to explain a particular concept. And so Christian nationalists are looked at as, the Handmaid's Tale. And
which is fake.
It's definitely it is definitely a focus on men and women's roles and equality and equity, because those are the extremes of bad behavior on both sides that society, promotes. But what if men are abusive? Are women still supposed to be submissive? But what if women are fully feminist? Are men supposed to marry them? Like, there's all these extremes. It's like, whoa, let's go come to the center and to kind of get away from the men and women egalitarian conversation and go into more of a practical stance in Christian nationalism. I would ask a question. You have in the United States large communities of religious sects that have different laws or beliefs. So, for instance, Mormonism in Utah with Brigham Young had polygamy as a common practice, and it wasn't outlawed until like 1895 or something, 1890 something. It wasn't outlawed, or it wasn't stopped in the church, at least a lot of the church. The United States government saw what the Mormons were doing in Utah. Like, they wanted their own sovereign state as a Mormon nation, essentially. If you look at the church history and the early documents of Brigham Young and all of the presidents that followed him, and polygamy was a big thing. And the United States government had to come in and say, nah, we get that you have the freedom to have your own society, to make your own laws, but we're drawing the line at polygamy. You can't do that. Why? Because we're the government, and we're not going to let this happen, because that is it is opposed to the moral foundations of society.
Yes,
the people, right there,
not the government. The people. No. The government is a representative of the people and our founders.
Correct.
And the people, we collectively, that is a bridge too far. Too far.
And so use case number 2, you got Dearborn, Michigan, has a huge Muslim population. Now, if you look throughout the world, when the Muslim population, when they come to the West and they integrate into societies, they tend to be very family oriented. There's a great level of hospitality within those communities, but the bigger that they grow, the more their own ideologies get integrated in. So the question is, should we allow Sharia law to be executed in Dearborn, Michigan? and just Dearborn, Michigan, and say you have autonomy, you have a majority of your community, you have your people voting in your politicians and your own local laws, and you can make certain things mandatory. But then ultimately at the end of the day, it's like whoa, wait, Dearborn, Michigan it's not its own sovereign nation,
right?
And it's not, and it is in conflict with the people of the United States to say. Honor killings are not allowed. That's murder. You can't do that.
Frowned upon.
Or you cannot force someone to, wear something to be modest and have
a burqa
and face consequences, right? So those types of things, and I would use this. And guys, let me know if you've heard this, but like they're dealing with this in the UK, like to the extreme, and in
Austria.
Europe in general, And so, like, for instance, Germany and UK and everything, like the amount of rapes that have happened since in the last 25 years has risen exponentially. It went from like 1,300 a year to like now it's like,
dude, we just had a Syrian. Listen, just literally yesterday.
It's ridiculous.
Or not yesterday. Earlier this week. It was earlier this week in Dresden on the train. Syrian. Nationals who were here on a refugee status, right? They're in Germany as refugees, were accosting women. An American stepped up to, like, help this woman, and the dude, like, cut the dude's nose off with a knife.
Holy.
And then, 12 hours later, he was released. Like, the Syrian national.
I saw that. I saw the picture of that. I saw it. Yeah. That was, but that is a case in which they are saying, well, your religion and your culture, that's you, and we are not here to say that's wrong, right?
And
because
ultimately, this whole conversation goes back to at some point, someone has to draw lines in the sand.
Exactly.
And we did that.
Exactly. And where is the line? Are we drawing it with a Judeo-Christian ethic?
Exactly.
Are we drawing it with the authority of what the Bible says? Or are we drawing it saying it's a squiggly line that says, okay, well, here's the Mormons, here's the Muslims, here's the Hindus, here's the Christians, here's the it doesn't. You can't have opposing views integrate into the same society and communicate effectively and live harmoniously. I just can't go to their place and they can't come to my place. We don't have a country,
And here's where we arrive at the reality, and this is something that everybody needs to get on board with, because this is a fact of life. You have to get comfortable if you want to live in your convictions. If you want to live out your convictions, you must become comfortable with making enemies. People will say mean things about you. People will call you names like Christian nationalist, as if it is supposed to be derogatory. It's been made derogatory. To me, when you say Christian nationalist, I'm like, so what are you describing? Political theory from the perspective of a Christian? Because the answer is yes. Are you like, it's not like, yes, what do you expect? Would you expect me to do? And I find that the answer is always best asked as a question. When somebody says, oh, you must be a Christian nationalist, and you say, well, let me ask you a question. Would you suggest to me that I should not live out my convictions? Should I not vote according to my faith in the way that I see the world? Would you apply? And if they say yes, I would say that. I said, okay, would you apply? Would you go to China or Korea or Japan or Africa or any other culture that's vastly different from yours and tell them to change because of it makes you uncomfortable? And all that highlights is this: these people have no integrity, which is to say, first of all, they barely know what they believe. They know what they feel, but they have not connected the dots between their actions and their beliefs. And at the point where a person doesn't do that, there's no point in having a conversation beyond that. You simply must stop trying to befriend and stop trying to find some happy medium in common ground, because the reality is you're not going to. And you know what? We have to, as Christians, have to be comfortable with people not liking us. It's true. Because they're not rejecting you. They're uncomfortable with God. And you know what? That's the first step to realizing that they're in need of him.
And
so let's
there's
not deprive
some story
people of that.
I remember hearing of people not liking somebody so much that they decided to murder him, and he ended up rescuing us all and providing us
where do we hear about that, right?
for eternity. So it's not about just making everybody happy and getting along. It's about knowing the truth. And I loved your take, Hughes, on Christian nationalism is a dirty word, but we are Christians living in Babylon, voting our faith, conscience, morality, and ethics. Again, to bring about truth, goodness, and beauty as we see God's kingdom of God is here and now. If you're still here, leave a comment. We'd love to know what you thought about Christian nationalism and the idea of it. Really, your comments are our favorite things. We had a couple amazing comments on the last episode, so feel free to weigh in if you have a question or if you have an episode you want us to do. We love hearing from you guys. Give us a subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you on the next episode of the I'm Telling God About This podcast.
Till next time, guys.
Civilization, all you have 20 years of dumpster fires, purple hair, people who don't know which bathroom to go into. Get off my lawn.